welcome to Focus 54, your real feel of African news. My name is Jeffrey Murimbeshi, and today we're not in studio, we're out and about at the Harare International Conference Center, which is hosting the World Tobacco Africa Summit, which is a two-day summit that brings together delegates from all over the world in the tobacco industries, from growers, buyers, merchants, and those within the processing. This is the African hot pot in which players from around the world have expressed interest to work together. Deals, MOUs and expressions of interest have been signed, and it is the one place where we have a rare opportunity for everyone to come through and meet. We will speak later on with some of the delegates who are part of this and talk about the dreaded El Nino induced drought that has been affecting Zimbabwe and the SADC region, as well as some parts of Central Africa. Now, before we do that, we start touching down on the stories that have been making headlines this week, and we touch down in South Africa, which is holding the Africa Travel Indaba, where several countries, including Zimbabwe, are coming through from the tourism sector, just trying to find ways in which they can add more value and increase the number of visits within Africa. And this is a huge summit which is discussing many things in hindsight of things such as the free trade areas, taxation issues, ease of travel, ease of doing business, and that will be a hot pot and a conversation that will be continued later on in the SADC summit that will be hosted in Zimbabwe in August. Now, also in South Africa is very big on electric vehicles, and EVs have become what the young people call a thing, as the EVs have now penetrated the Southern African market, with South Africa leading that charge, and Zimbabwe having hosted and held the first ever showroom for electronic vehicles. In hindsight of mining sector, which is booming, with lithium being one of the key components that is available in both South Africa and Zimbabwe, and this has been taking charge. And also Botswana has launched a citrus growing project to diversify the economy and boost food security. Now, this economy has not been touched, and there is some virgin territory for growers in the citrus industry who have been moving around the world and speaking through interactive and backdoor meetings with the agricultural sector within Africa, and we will see a boom in the citrus trade within Botswana. And finally, we touched down in Nigeria, the economic hot pot of the continent, which has had struggles with power issues. And of late, we have seen protests as Nigerians are Nigerians are up in arms and protesting against the massive power cuts which have affected not only homes, businesses, but for long have become a perennial menace in the lives of industry and individuals across Nigeria. Stay tuned to Focus 54. In the second segment, we'll start talking to the farmers, start talking to the merchants, and all the key players within the tobacco sector. Welcome to the second segment of Focus 54. It's now time for us to talk to the delegates that are part of the World Tobacco Africa Summit right here in Harare. Let's touch down and talk to the big players and find out how the tobacco industry in Africa and Zimbabwe is growing. I'm now joined by Mr. Phil Daka, all the way from Zambia, and he's the chairperson of the Zambia Tobacco Board. Phil, good to have you in Zimbabwe at this World Tobacco Africa Conference, and how's it been going for you?
It's good to be here, and thanks for having me. So yeah, the conference has been going very, very good, and this is a very laudable initiative by the World Tobacco Africa, as well as all the sponsors that you're seeing here, TIMB, and of course not forgetting the power from the government of the Republic of Zimbabwe. So this is a very, very, I think, deliberate platform for all the players in the sector to sit, cross-fertilize and speak about collaborations and the win-wins in the sector itself. So yeah, it's pretty much a very good sitting. More reason we are here. And this is a meeting that has really brought quite a number of players, not only African players, not only growers, but we have equipment manufacturers, we have pesticide manufacturers, seed manufacturers, regulators like ourselves, we have bankers in there that obviously are looking at financing the crop, and people that are big on value addition from the crop. Yeah, so it's a very, very wonderful platform.
Now, some of our viewers are very curious about how well the Zambian tobacco industry and sector is performing. What is the state of affairs in Zambia right now, in hindsight of the El Nino-induced drought?
That's a very good question, and I expected it to come. And these are some of the things that we've been discussing in the meeting the last 2 days. You see, SADC has been really being hit by El Nino, and that has infringed on not only the crop itself, but the food security of these countries. Coming back to the specific question on the crop itself, we've been affected. We projected 60 million, and I think we have 15% less owing to the El Nino. But look, you see, El Nino also comes with its own lessons, just like COVID did. But this one is a very natural calamity which you, myself, or anybody in this meeting have no control over. But also it speaks to the state of preparedness, because we've been doing tobacco for some long time, and everyone in agriculture has been doing agriculture for some long time. So we need to also speak about certain practices that will not really knock us very hard. Issues like factorization or mechanization of agricultural practices in the tobacco sector. So we're speaking water harvesting, we're speaking many other sustainable ways of producing the crop. Why am I saying this? I think 65% of the crop itself is rain-fed. So most of the small-scale farmers are highly dependent on the rains. So with the disruption that we saw from El Nino, and everyone else is crying. So I think those are some of the lookouts for. We need to make sure that going forward we have other water harvesting mechanisms that will make sure that the crop is going bad. It's not really a trend smash. It's something that we are really saying, look, as a T5, and a T5 I'm talking the 5 SADC tobacco growing countries, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, and Tanzania. What is it that we ought to be doing? So if you follow the presentation in this meeting that we are having, there's quite a lot of things that is talking about sustainability and how we're going to employ effective practices. We are happy that we have TRA Kusaga in the building. I think these guys are pioneers when it comes to research and development in talking about drought-resistant seedlings and. So these are some of the things we need to replicate in all the jurisdictions where this crop is being produced. So yes, El Nino has really given a certain gloomy complexion on the yield. If I may borrow, last year Zimbabwe did something in the boundary of 250 million plus kgs. But this time they're all crying, they're looking at 220 somewhere thereabouts. That's a significant drop. But if we are people that are going to embrace very innovative practices, I think El Nino and all these other weather and climatic glooms or attacks will have less on the crop.
And now, from the T5, how important is it to invest a little bit more in research and development?
It's very important because you see, the world is evolving, and also the destinations where the crop that is coming from the T5 is going is also very peculiar. You know, peculiar in the sense that they are demanding certain variants, they're demanding certain textures and certain crop sizes and types. So we need to be yielding to that. So yes, research and development is very, very key. Why? Number one, I just talked about obviously bringing in very drought-resistant crops. Number two, this is a cash crop. We need high yield, early maturity, you know, and all these other things. So it's an activity that needs to be embraced at all levels or all echelons, whether at commercial, mid, or small scale. So it's something that we need.
Thank you very much, Mr. Phil Daka, who's joining us all the way from Zambia, the chairperson of the Zambia Tobacco Board, and some very insightful words from him: research and development, sustainability, and learning a lot of lessons from the El Nino-induced droughts and getting to get the yield straight to the market, among one of those things. Thank you very much. Now we're joined by some of the local giants, I would say one of the mavericks in the tobacco industry, Premium Leaf Zimbabwe, one of the giants in the game. And I'm joined by Brendan Boshi. Brendan, you've been enjoying 2 days of the World Tobacco Africa Summit. Has it been worth your while so far?
Yes, it's always nice to see our customers face to face, mix and mingle with new people. Yeah, it's been a good time so far.
Now, as merchants who are working with the farmers and the uptakers of our great tobacco in Zimbabwe, how has the season been like for you in terms of supply, in hindsight of things such as, the amount of tobacco that's available on the market at the moment?
The season's been a little bit slower than usual. The tobacco's come in a lot more slow. It usually comes in really fast, but due to the staggered transplanting, because of the late rains, tobacco's coming in a bit slower, so it's been a steady season, and there's still a lot of tobacco to come in.
What is it about our tobacco that makes us the greatest, the largest exporter of tobacco in the world? Has anyone figured that out?
Zimbabwe is renowned for having very good flavored tobacco. It's full flavored, bodied leaf, and yeah, it's very flavor of tobacco, Zimbabwe.
And you deal a lot with the world markets. What's the world view, just general uptake of African tobacco, and what can African countries do to just maximize on this industry?
I think demand is quite high at the moment globally, so if guys can just focus on being sustainable so that they can grow very large crops and sell the tobacco on, I think it'll work for everyone.
And lastly, quite scary and a real reality, climate change affecting the rest of the world, and we're not spared. El Nino-induced drought, has that taken a punch at the tobacco industry back here in Zimbabwe?
I think the quality this year has been slightly lower than before, but there's still some very nice tobacco coming in, and yeah, we'll wait and see for the rest of the season. I think there's still about half the crop to come in my opinion, so yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that looks.
I know you must have met a couple of international delegates and people from the same industry. What's the general perspective of this conference and this meet and greet thing that's going on?
These conferences are always very well supported, and guys love coming in and seeing their suppliers. So yeah, it's been good. Guys have been very happy with what's happened here.
All right, thank you so much. Brendan Boshi joining us, and he's from Premium Leaf Zimbabwe, one of the biggest giants in the tobacco industry, and doing the Lord's work, getting our great tobacco all the way from the ground to the international markets. I'm now joined by the CFO of Sahara Tobacco, Mr. Titus Moravanyika, who is one of the exhibitors and one of the stalwarts, an entity that is a proud entity based here in Zimbabwe. Good to have you on Focus 54. Have you been enjoying this 2-day event?
We, as Sahara Tobacco, we have been enjoying this event, and we are also hopeful that it will be replicated in years to come. Why? Because we have been able to get in contact with valuable international buyers. It's so difficult to get international buyers in one room and also be able to interact with them. And we've also been in a position to conclude some trade finance and other supplying opportunities of the Zimbabwean flue-cured tobacco.
Now let's talk a little bit about the African continent because this show does specifically focus on that. Have you had any delegates from other African countries who've expressed interest to gather knowledge from you or expressed interest to work with you going forward throughout these 2 days?
Yes, being a first of its kind in Africa, the World Tobacco Africa, we have received delegates from Zambia, from Tanzania, from Malawi. All these have expressed their interest in working with us in various aspects, from tobacco contract farming up to the processing stages. this El Nino-induced below normal rains have negatively impacted our tobacco, such that around 20 to 25% yields have fallen because of the El Nino-induced droughts. So probably on a national basis, as compared to last season, where we almost hit 300 million, this year we're expecting around 230 to 40 marks because of the droughts.
Now let's talk about what you as a business, as an entity that is dealing with local and international players would want to happen internationally in terms of relations to expand your business to go beyond 400 million.
The 400 million or 300 million target, the 300 million enunciated by the minister is achievable if we get proper lines of credit. Because what happens if these farmers are properly funded, as we try to do, we do fund up to $1,000 per hectare. So if we get cheaper lines of credit, we'll be in a position to fund more growers. And for those who are funding already, who are doing 1 hectare, we'll be in a position then to uplift them to 2 hectares, to 5 hectares, depending on capacity and knowledge. But funding is key.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maranyika, one of the stalwarts and the big players in Zimbabwe, with the Zimbabwean Golden Leaf proving to be one of the best in the world with a huge uptake. And as you've heard it, the World Tobacco Africa Summit is the one place still at the World Tobacco Africa Conference 2-day summit that is happening in Harare, and we're speaking to some of our international delegates, and all the way from Indonesia have Emmanuel coming through. Tell us a little bit about your business and where your company is from.
Okay, so our company is based in Singapore, and we have our factory back in Indonesia, and we do cigarette machinery. We do cigarette producing machinery, and we also do cigarette packing machinery as well.
Now, let's talk a little bit about doing business in Africa. How has it been like? Do you have a lot of business interests within African countries, and how has this conference been for you?
Yeah, this conference has been pretty good. I mean, like, we do have a lot of local customers, also from African customers from other countries like Botswana and like from Angola and Tanzania. We are trying to actually penetrate to the African market more, because so far we don't have that much the African market. So we're trying to penetrate more to the African market, yeah.
Now, there's been a growing concern about value addition and processing raw tobacco from the ground. Is this an opportunity for you to get into the African market and provide with more machines and make more cigarettes locally?
Yeah, of course. Like, I mean, whenever there's a chance for us, like, to make business in Africa, like, whether it's from the tobacco industry and from like the packaging industry, like, yeah, we're looking forward to that. Yeah.
Have you found it difficult to penetrate in some of these markets, and what would you like as as a foreigner to make it easy for you to do business within the African continent?
Well, I mean, yeah, basically the African continent is growing rapidly in the past few years. I mean, yeah, for the African market, yeah, we're really trying to penetrate more to it, and but now, yeah, as we're still trying to penetrate it. Yeah, we've been getting a lot of inquiries from Zimbabwe and from Tanzania. Yeah, so far so good.
All right, thank you very much, and we hope for all the best, and thank you so much for coming to the conference.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We are here at the World Tobacco Africa conference, and it's a two-day summit. We've been meeting with bankers, we've been meeting with other players in the industry. What are the key takeaways that Heritage Tobacco Handlers has taken from this conference and the highlights of this conference for you?
Okay, for the past 4 years, we have been supplying the Chinese market. We managed to come this side to exhibit as most of the international delegates were coming in. We managed to secure some prospects in terms of takers of other markets besides the Chinese market.
Now, I do understand that you're also linked with one of your, I believe, subsidiaries or partners in business, which is CP Chemicals. How has the agrochemical sector been like, and has it been also affected by this El Nino-induced drought?
Yes, the drought also affected our main company, the CP Chemicals. We are a subsidiary of CP Chemicals. We didn't manage to have much sales because of poor rainfall. Because with more rainfall, the herbicides that are used to control weeds, we didn't manage to sell much since it was very dry this season. So for most farmers didn't use most of the chemicals that we have.
And then lastly, as we close off, would you come to the WTA once again?
Yes, definitely we do. And the next time that we are coming in, we should have penetrated much of the market. And also we are going to be exhibiting to other world tobacco conferences outside Harare or Zimbabwe.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Lloyd Mandizviza, who is from Heritage Tobacco Handlers, saying that no country and no farmer and business has been spared from the El Nino-induced drought, and everyone is working very hard behind the scenes and signing deals and having commitments of intent so that they can grow this agro sector, which is tobacco, and make sure that we can mitigate the effects of climate change. Now I am joined by the country head of the Italian Trade Agency, Mr. Tino Kambasha, who is right here at the World Tobacco Africa Summit that's being held at the HICC in Harare. Tino, good to have you. You seem to be very busy. I see you're not with one entity. What has been your scope of work and the groundwork that you're doing at this summit?
Yeah, we've been quite busy. We've got 4 Italian companies here in the value addition process in the tobacco industry. So what we're doing is basically answering the call that tobacco, we're trying to take up more of the market by value adding locally. So therefore the money won't leave Zimbabwe and we'll get more people to get employed in Zimbabwe and the funds stay here.
I know as a country head, you're also involved in, many other things, such as, working in other African countries. Let's talk about barriers of entry. Are there any barriers of entry, and how are you guys mitigating this throughout the African continent?
Well, there are barriers to entry. Different countries have got their own tariffs and taxes. So we're hoping that when the Free Africa Trade Area kicks in properly, we'll see some of these barriers fall away. It's obviously some markets have got a much better equipment, bigger numbers, so their scale is much better. So it'll take countries like ourselves a bit longer to rival the types like South Africa, but with free entry and free movement of equipment and free movement of skills, I think we'll get there and we'll have one big market in Africa.
Now let's talk about your trade agency. Coming from Italy, it has a rich history of an industrial economy and many other things. What are the Italians interested in Zimbabwe and the rest of Africa?
I think it's not just Italy, it's globally. Africa is the biggest growing continent, and it had been neglected for quite a long time. So I think the world is waking up. We're seeing all these Zimbabwe or Africa, Italy or Africa, Europe summits that are happening. It's just that they're seeing what's happening, and it's buzzing. The numbers are great. The people are educated and friendly. So I think Zimbabwe in particular, because this is my country, but Africa as a whole is the next frontier market.
Now, I know you're an investment guy. You're not all about the chit-chat. Are deals and agreements, MOUs, and letters of interest being signed at the summit? And can we see money changing hands very soon?
Definitely, especially in the value adding. The packaging space, we've seen quite a lot of transactions going through in that space, and we're also getting a lot of inquiries from, so the traditional cigarette companies locally would have had their usual suppliers. Now we're seeing a bit of competition coming through, so it's quite exciting for us, and we look forward to more deals.
And lastly, was this whole summit worth your while?
120%, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Still at the World Tobacco Africa Summit, speaking to some of the local players, and this time I'm joined by Sahara Makwanya. Sahara, let's talk about this conference and how it's been like. What have been the key takeaways from this two-day summit?
There's been quite a lot. I think it's obviously been very eye-opening, interacting with a lot of end users that have come to see what we're exhibiting here and how we operate in Zimbabwe, and showing their interest. Or the one thing, it seems there's a bit of a global shortage, hence there's been a few people that you'd ordinarily not meet anywhere else, probably on email, over the phone, but it's also just good to see people and put a face to a name and the business.
Now, there's been a euphoric story about how Zimbabwe has made tons of money through tobacco. Have you met any guys from other African countries throughout the summit who have expressed interest on how we do things?
There's been some, I think I've met some guys from Angola, Tanzania, Zambia, and Mozambique mainly. Those are the ones that I've met so far.
Is there a realistic chance that some of these countries will then catch up to Zimbabwe and get part of our playbook to be a part of the value chain of the tobacco industry?
I think the one country that I've been focusing on a bit and maybe paying a bit of attention to has been Tanzania. They seem to want to grow their crop. I think recently they were talking of doing 120 million kgs, and now they're looking to do about 200 million in the next few years. So they're also probably just copying us and learning from what we've done, and obviously trying to grow their industry there.
Not just specific to Sahara Tobacco, but as tobacco players in Zimbabwe. How have you helped the industry survive the El Nino-induced drought, and how has that affected production and the numbers this season?
Well, the numbers look to be down, definitely, because of the season we've had, as you've mentioned. But I'm sure you see the prices are firm, quite firm. But I think it's also just a thing of supply and demand. And the farmers seem to be slightly happy with what's happening. I think generally you can never satisfy any farmer, or no amount of money is enough. But I think the industry has done enough to sort of keep everyone afloat and help with the season that we've had. And hopefully guys can be cushioned into next season.
And then lastly, what would it take for African players to gain more value, get bigger figures internationally?
I think the biggest thing is probably value addition, and I'm sure you've seen the government hopping on about that. And it's definitely something we need to move into and have a look at. But albeit we also need to be very careful of how we do it. I mean, if you look at the smoking numbers locally, they're not that great. And it's probably something we need to grow, or if we're going to export like we do, maybe also just look at the value addition in agreement with our customers and end users.
From Sahara Tobacco to Sahara Makwanya, still reiterating the same sentiments of value addition to gain more value from the products that we are making as African nations. For Focus 54, I am Jeffrey Murimbechi.